This is an impersonation of Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes using generative AI. The video was created as part of the Arizona Election Security and AI tabletop exercise for the media. Our goal is to make sure folks understand the capabilities of current deepfake technology and the dangers it poses to the public. The real Adrian Fontes is fluent in English and Spanish, but AI-generated content using his likeness has no such limitations. Let's try talking in German. Damit ein böswilliger Angreifer Inhalte für ihn generieren kann, müssen weder Sie noch Ihr Ziel eine Sprache sprechen können. Consider the best and worst ways this technology can be used. It allows an individual to communicate with an audience in their native language using your voice. However, a malicious actor could use your likeness and benefit from the trust that people place in you to trick them and spread dangerous lies. Now, how about French? Les outils permettant de créer du contenu synthétique sont facilement disponibles, peu coûteux et accessibles à un plus grand nombre de personnes chaque jour. One of the hallmarks of phishing email has been poor spelling and grammar. Those days are over. Voice cloning is basically perfect. Many of you have heard the impersonation of President Biden targeting Massachusetts voters. It could have caused a lot more damage. What's the most negative use of the president's voice that you can imagine? We hope you enjoyed today's exercise, that you learn more about the experience of being an election official, and that it gives you additional context on how you report about elections. A final thought: you can't blindly trust what you see or hear anymore. Especially if something elicits a strong reaction from you, ask yourself this: what is the source? Is this content real?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the real Secretary of State of Arizona, Adrian Fontes.
Buenas noches, damas y caballeros. Les doy una gran bienvenida aquí. Sorry, I sometimes forget where I'm at. This is the real me. I want to thank American Promise for having me today. I got a chance to say hello to the congressman on his way out. Great guy. And I, again, want to thank the staff and all the folks at American Promise for keeping this activity going, because without the folks behind the scenes, nobody can do the work that they do. So let's give them a big round of applause as well. And I will challenge my friend Seth, who we spoke a bit with. There are some politicians who are trying to solve problems. And if the problem is catching people by surprise with the tactics of our enemies that they don't understand and having them kneecapped by the newness of it, then we are solving that problem. Because in Arizona, we're using videos just like this, not only to train our own elections officials so that they'll be able to look at the process of responding instead of being caught like deer in the headlights with this newness. We're teaching our media partners at the national and state level with the same kinds of tools that the bad guys will be using, so that when they go out to talk about these sorts of things, they will also not be surprised by the newness of it. And starting on Friday morning, we're going to be training our law enforcement partners across the great state of Arizona to make sure that if we are faced with these sorts of weapons in the fight to preserve our democracy, then we are going to be able to face them together, because that's what this is about. AI threats are the bad parts about artificial intelligence, but there are also great opportunities. And I think anyone who's involved in business has already probably looked to try to capitalize one way or another on the efficiencies that artificial intelligence, particularly generative artificial intelligence, and the large language models that they draw from can benefit for not just their businesses. And we're also exploring a lot of these sorts of resources in election administration. And you should hear some good stuff coming out of the Secretary of State's office in Arizona on or about 27 June of this year. That was just a little tease for something that I'm not going to tell you about right now. One of the most important pieces of this amendment that we're all working on, the For Our Freedom Amendment, is the clear distinction between natural persons and artificial entities. What you saw on the screen is an artificial entity. Corporations are artificial entities. Nonprofits, C4s, you pick those other categories, are different from natural persons. And I think this is one of the most clear-cut spaces where we can even start to consider in the Constitution of the United States of America, looking at distinguishing between those things where we, sort of the common folk out there, look to the notion of common sense interpretation of what is a person. And we see a lot of other people looking at some different things and different attitudes about that. So really what we have here is a couple of different facets to this gem of an amendment that maybe we haven't completely explored yet, that can be discovered in the language, and some of the intentionality that can be transferred into other spaces that can help. And so I look to you all, and I look to you for that guidance, for that imagination, for that extra exploratory space. What other benefits can be derived from this language and from this amendment? Because where we're at right now is a really critical point. And I think one of the really important things that I wanted to show in this was the potential impact, not just negative, but positive, that artificial intelligence, that this new kind of technology can bestow upon the nation. The good stuff and the bad stuff. But there isn't a human endeavor that is engageable, that we participate in, that will not be touched by this technology. Try to pick one. Law, medicine, science and technology, education, arts, business, everything. Any bit of information exchange from human being to human being can be impacted by artificial intelligence. And the generative artificial intelligence is also in that space. And we really need to pay attention to this. And we really need our leaders to pay attention to this. They need to pay attention to this for us, the natural people. For us, their actual constituents, not the artificial entities. And that's the reason why this constitutional amendment, in my humble view, is one of the more important endeavors that we have seen. That's why the people in this room are in the most important room in America, as indicated by our friend the congressman. This is a big deal. And we got to make sure that when we're looking at the way that we're regulating this sort of thing, and there's been a hodgepodge of attempts in Arizona and Colorado and Wisconsin and other places to try to figure out how to put this genie into some kind of a bottle, or even put bumpers on the lanes so that it doesn't go all over the place. But we all know that the way our government is built, it's a totally new dynamic that we're facing here, folks. So it's going to fall to us. It's going to fall to business. It's going to fall to the leaders in the business community, who are leaders in so many different ways in our democracy. And I want to make sure that we really understand and that we appreciate, particularly the following notion. Democracy is really good for business. And there's going to be a lot of people who might look at this amendment as an attack on business. And what we have to make sure to communicate is that it's not what's happening right now isn't necessarily anti-democratic, it's anti-people. It's anti-you, the individual person. It's anti-your voice and the American citizen's voice, the natural person's voice. We cannot be finding ourselves in a place where we're competing against business interests, because a lot of the folks in this room have vested interests in business. And we know that democracy is good for business. I challenge you. Describe to me an authoritarian regime where innovation is important. Describe to me a totalitarian state where you can rise from the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder and find your way all the way to the top. Describe to me a closed society with a one-party rule where you're going to get a fair shake in court to protect your property interests, to make sure that you can get your licensing and your permitting in a fair way. Maybe a little slow, but at least in a fair way. Democracy is good for business. One of the main reasons why America has been so good at what it does, the business of America is business, he says in the parenthetical voice. One of the main reasons we've been so good at it is because we've had a very robust democracy for many, many generations. And so we need to not just engage our CEOs, our influencers, the people who are making sure that the folks on Capitol Hill get the resources that they need. We need to communicate to them clearly that this is not anti-business. This is pro-people. This is pro-Americans. Because democracy is good for business. It's good for that. I'm getting a big nod from Houston Republican over here. I love that. I love that. Thank you, sir. I'll take more. Just keep on going. We have to absolutely make sure that we're not, it's not a hair that we're splitting here. It's the biggest of topics, and we've got to be very clear. Because a lot of the folks that are going to be against this are going to be those business interests. Now, I know you've got Hill visits tomorrow, and you're going to want to use those personal stories, as was talked about, to inspire. But let's make it very, very clear why we are fighting for this, why we are advocating for this. Because just like the decency and the joy that the congressman was talking about, we are advocating for American people and the voice of the American people. This is not anti-business. And we've got to be very clear about that. The theme of what we're discussing here is hope in the age of polarization. And what I've just described is not a political polarization. It's a polarization of perspective. That anytime you have an amendment like this, there has to be a side A and there has to be a side B. Because the folks that will tell us the story, those who will dictate the narrative of our society in the media, tell one story without imagination. They tell us an A versus B. They pit those two over there against each other. One a liberal, one a conservative. They will pit business against people. And that's just the wrong way to look at this. And so with hope, we have to move forward. You know, in election administration, we are perpetual planners. We've got to know what to do if the power goes out at that polling place on election day, because the polls are going to close soon. We've got to have a plan for in case the warehouse catches on fire on election day. We've got to have a plan for what happens if there's an AI deepfake of the Secretary of State that comes up and says, guess what? The polls are closing at 2 p.m. If you haven't voted already, don't. I have hope because this country and our elections is still run by Americans. I have hope because I believe in the American people. All of the stories that you've seen up here today are about the American people. They are about that hope. They are about us together growing, progressing as a society. We can do this. We can do anything because of you. And I say this to election workers, not just in Arizona, but across the country. We do this because of you. And if we lose that faith, that civic faith that we have one in another, then we are succumbing to the folks who want us divided. They don't want democracy to work. They want some kind of authoritarian, totalitarian, pick your neo, blah, blah, adjective word. They don't want American democracy to thrive. In fact, I saw recently where someone was writing a paper about what a post-democracy, a post-constitution America is going to look like after 2024. But I don't lose hope in the face of that, because we've got folks just like you, not just running our elections, but running the motor vehicle division. They're running the land registry at county clerk offices. They're doing the property assessments. They're making sure that our bridges and our roads and our airports are working well for us. Maybe we could fund some of that a little better, but at the end of the day, hope is about us having civic faith in one another and not succumbing to the divisiveness that has, I will be very blunt, originated from outside of this country. It's magnified by people inside this country, but it originates out there because our enemies cannot beat us from the outside. They can't. But they can get us to beat each other from the inside. And that's why gatherings like this are so important, and that's why they give me hope. Because as Americans, like President Eisenhower said, here's the rough paraphrase, if we work on the things that unite us, we won't have time to be divided. That's what this is about. I'm so grateful for your attention tonight. I'm so happy that you heard me speak in languages that I don't speak. And I'm so proud to be with you, the faithful, those of us who have civic faith, not just in America, but in Americans. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.